Sorry. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I, Maria Ateek, Second Secretary at the Embassy of Pakistan, would like to welcome you all in the webinar organized to highlight India's unilateral and illegal actions in occupied Jammu and Kashmir on August 5, 2020. In this regard, today we have a very distinguished panel of speakers to speak on this very important development. Before highlighting its humanitarian and human rights aspects and how it poses a threat to peace, security, and stability of the region, we have people who will share their views. Before I formally start the program, I would like to tell you that we are live streaming the developments of this webinar on our Facebook page. Time permitting, the participants will take your questions, which you can send to the chat box. Each speaker has been assigned a slot of 5 to 7 minutes, and you are requested to please deliver your remarks during that time. Due to paucity of time, we would request you to keep the time limit into consideration. So to formally begin the seminar, I would like to request Ambassador of Pakistan, Dr. Asad Majid, to give his introductory remarks.
Thank you very much, Maria, and I'd like to thank our very distinguished panelists today for joining us this afternoon to show solidarity with the people of Indian illegally occupied Kashmir and to be their voice. To be the voice of voiceless Kashmiris today. Today, it is almost 1,100 days since August 5, 2019, when India violated actually its own international commitments that it gave to the UN Security Council in violation of its bilateral understandings and agreements with Pakistan, and also against the promises made by its leaders to the people of Kashmir, undertook a series of unilateral actions seeking to annex these disputed territories. Now, since then, India has also, to further the objectives of those unilateral actions, India has also undertaken steps aimed at demographically re-engineering the population of Kashmir by giving fake domiciles to millions of outsiders, basically to marginalize Kashmiris in their own land. And they have also tried to create a false sense of normalcy, where they have clearly failed, because Kashmiris today are more than ever determined to resist, determined to oppose, and also united in opposing the unilateral actions that were taken on August 5. Because of this failure to project a false sense of normalcy, clearly we see that the Indian desperation is going up. We have seen that on display in the measures that the authorities in Kashmir took in not allowing a decent burial, which is everyone's right, irrespective of their religion, caste, or creed, or political affiliation. And the measures that they took in the case of the revered Kashmiri leader, Sayyid Ali Jilani, and also what we are seeing in the case of the sham trial on fictitious charges of Mr. Yasin Malik. Now, these steps, while indicating the Indian desperation, we are also seeing basically an increase, basically no letter in repression in Kashmir. Pakistan obviously is more firm than ever before in extending political, moral, and diplomatic support to our Kashmiri brothers in securing their right of self-determination, which has been promised by international community to them. And I'm very thankful to our very distinguished panelists today to basically throw light on various aspects of this important issue. Therefore, and I'm sure they are much more qualified to speak on the subject than I am, and therefore I would not want to take too much time, given the paucity of time that we have. But I do want to because I think these webinars are important in actually sensitizing people around the world on where exactly is the problem. And I think one of the impressions that the Indian authorities have been trying to give is that Kashmir is India's internal matter. Well, it is not. Kashmir is an internationally recognized dispute. It is one of the longest outstanding disputes on the UN Security Council agenda. It is a dispute that the Indians themselves had recognized as a disputed territory, and it is recognized as such by almost all countries around the world. We are also seeing a massive human rights and humanitarian catastrophe at play in the occupied Kashmir that the world need to know. And I'm sure that today, through the presentations to be made by our distinguished panelists, we'll be able to throw and shed more light and sensitize our audience today on what is going on actually on the ground. I think the last and the most important point is how Kashmir and its continued lack of resolution poses a threat to the security stability of South Asia, because both India and Pakistan, being nuclear powers, are engaged in this territorial dispute. And therefore, it is ever more important and relevant for the international community to use their good offices to urge India, first of all, to reverse those measures that were taken on August 5 in violation of their own commitments, but also to move further in engaging with Pakistan in a dialogue to finally resolve this issue. So I think I'll stop here. I'll yield back the floor to Maria to have our distinguished speakers speak on various aspects of this important issue. Thank you very much once again, all the distinguished panelists, for joining us this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador. So our first speaker of the day is Lord Wajid Al Khan, Baron Khan of Burnley, and former member of the European Parliament and a member of the Subcommittee on Human Rights. He shall enlighten our panelists regarding the role that Europe can play for the resolution of the Jammu and Kashmir dispute. Mr. Wajid, the floor is yours.
First of all, good morning. It's morning here in the UK, and thank you, Maria, for inviting me, and thank you, Your Excellency, Ambassador Asad Khan, for hosting this webinar today. Let me start off by saying it's a pleasure to be back connected with the Brussels arena. It's been a while since I left the European Parliament, where I've been actually involved with anything Brussels has organised. So it's important 3 years later, as kindly the ambassador very eloquently spoke about, the way the abrogation of Article 370, 35A, and what that's meant to the Kashmiri people. And first of all, I want to start off by saying I salute the resilience of the Kashmiri people. As a member of European Parliament, when I was there working on human rights, we achieved a lot of things in terms of securing a historic exchange of views in February 2019, first after 12 years. co-authored 50 MEPs letter sent to PM Modi, just directly looking at the issue of pellet guns used against children. And I also believe there's other colleagues who are former member of European Parliament. It was a really strong cross-party Friends of Kashmir group. They managed to kind of raise the issue of Kashmir, the plight of Kashmir continuously. And I think it's a shame that we have lost British MEPs in the European Parliament, because British MEPs were very much pioneers and the main driving force behind raising the Kashmir cause in the European Parliament. And I think that's an area where I think Your Excellency, you've got to focus on to engage the French, German, Spanish, Italian, other nationality, because they don't see the Kashmir issue through the lens of the British MEPs. So I just want to pay tribute to the Kashmiri people, because this is not about 3 years for them. This is about 75 years of struggle. And I think these webinars are so important to ensure that we continuously raise their voice, because this is about making sure the spirits and the fight and the kind of pursuit is never given up by the Kashmiri people. And when the Kashmiri people, as one person from Srinagar told me recently, when one of the colleagues speak up on the Kashmiri issue, it gives us that extra energy, extra kind of focus to ensure we continue to fight for our struggle. India was given their independence, Pakistan was given their independence, but Kashmiris were never given their independence. And I think the ambassador touched upon this. And India, they talk about being a bilateral and even unilateral with the way this is a multilateral issue, because this is an issue of human rights abuses. This isn't about being Kashmiri, it's about being a human being. And I look at the horrific incident of the Gunn Pashpara rapes, the use of pellet guns, the mass graves, the torture, and the way Kashmiri people have been continuously denied and abused and oppressed by Indian armed forces. And the AFSPA, the Armed Forces Special Powers Act, the Public Safety Act, these are archaic legislation, and no military personnel has ever been prosecuted as a result of violence and damage to Kashmiri civilians. And I think this is an issue of international law and being respected Geneva Conventions. And we've got to say to the United Nations, do your job. Kashmiri blood isn't cheaper than European blood. And Kashmiris are not asking for charity, they're asking for their rights bestowed upon them by UN resolutions in the 1940s. So we stay here. I remember, I'm sure, is it Phil Bennion? I can see possibly Phil Bennion online, yes, a former colleague of mine. And I can't remember any time where any visit to India, official visit, will allow people to visit Kashmir. Whereas I think Pakistan has made some good progress on that. We can now to visit the Pakistan side of Kashmir. And I think that's really a cause for concern. Why won't you let parliamentarians visit Jammu and Kashmir, Srinagar? Because what is there to hide? And I think, I'm really concerned about the BJP-led Modi government, how they've been unfortunately been catalyst for removal of human rights. Amnesty International no longer there, and I want to finish off by saying we've got to look at solutions now. And I look at how do we resolve this, and this is 75 years, and we continuously. It's important to attend our webinars, and I'll do my bit in the British Parliament in the House of Lords, where alongside the colleagues, to ensure that we make sure the voice of Kashmiri people, and what are they asking for? Stop human rights abuses and give us the opportunity to decide our future. I look at the recent problems in the UK with Ireland, and I remember the US playing a big role. I think we need an international broker that can get himself involved to ensure that there are important dialogues going on, back channeling, behind the scenes, whatever you want to call it, because there are recent historical disputes that have been resolved with interventions, and we've got to make sure that we use all our, whether it's the EU, whether it's Germany, whether it's Norway, or whatever country, we can get somebody involved to look at a particular way forward. And that's not impossible, because there was a 4-point plan by President Musharraf, unfortunately, that broke down. So let's look at solutions. Let's look at ways of moving forward. Thank you very much, Ambassador Asad Khan. I want to say this on record. The only country, in my view, that has continuously, persistently raised the Kashmir issue at every international forum has been Pakistan. So I understand their interest there, but I'm sure the brothers and sisters and the children of Kashmir are grateful for your embassies, the way you're doing your work to ensure the plight of Kashmiris are not ignored, and we continuously talk about them by attending these webinars and showing our love, support, and most importantly, solidarity for the people of Kashmir.
Thank you so much, Lord Wajid. Now I would like to invite our second speaker of the day, former member of the European Parliament and a British Liberal Democrat, Mr. Philip Bennion. Mr. Philip Bennion has always actively supported the just struggle of Kashmiris for a right of self-determination during his tenure both as a member of the European Parliament as well as a British politician. So Mr. Philip Bennion, the floor is now yours.
Yeah, thank you very much. Firstly, I just want to apologise because I'm going to have to rush off in a few minutes. We are actually harvesting at the moment, but my driver's just gone to fetch a trailer from a farm 4 miles away, so I've got just 10 or 15 minutes. Firstly, I mean, 3 years ago, I was when the revocation took place of Kashmiri autonomy by the Modi government. I was actually in the field that I'm going to go and harvest in a few minutes, and that's where I actually cut that video in front of my tractor. I actually stick to what I said then, that the revocation of Kashmiri autonomy is even illegal under Indian law, and I stick to that position. I've actually seen, even though the legitimacy of the documents that brought Kashmir or parts of it under Indian control, or partial Indian control, are disputed. Even those documents very, very clearly say that no unilateral action can take place to change the status quo. And the action was clearly unilateral when the autonomy was revoked. So for the first point, from a political point of view, we have got to press India and from all angles to restore the autonomy of Kashmir. And the issues of the various acts which give impunity to the military in Kashmir are absolutely egregious and in themselves enable human rights abuses. There are other speakers on this call that will know more about what's going on actually inside Kashmir at the moment than I do. So I'm going to concentrate on what we can do to try and bring this to a conclusion, because firstly, we have to actually stop the human rights abuses, and we have to actually get UN entry into Kashmir to actually see what's going on, and proper international visits from politicians so they can actually see what's going on. We've now got, I think, a restoration of the internet, which it may sound a minor point, but it is a major point, because commerce is now so dependent on the internet. I can remember in the European Parliament when some of those pushing the Indian line were saying that the intervention had been because Kashmir needed to catch up, and the Indian intervention was to improve the economy. Now, I intervened at that time and blue carded one of the speakers to say how on earth can that take place when the Kashmiri economy has been undermined by the removal of the internet. It's been removed. It's been undermined by the undermining of any possibility of a resurgence in the tourist industry in Kashmir. So the whole rationale that India has been giving for this is nonsensical. Now, in the longer term, I think we have to actually use all the leverage we have, and I agree that. The European Union has a role, and I also agree that it was the British MEPs, largely in the European Union, that kept the issue right at the foremost. But the Americans have a role, and I think that they are concerned at Modi's indiscretions and his move towards a really far right agenda. And the UK, of course, has a role. because of its historical perspectives. So we have to all work together to try and push the Indian government into a more reasonable position. We also need to work with political forces within India who are very, very uncomfortable. There's a lot of the not so much the political classes, but the middle classes, the more prosperous people in India, the more educated people in India, who are extremely uncomfortable with the line that India has been taking. So we also have to use our allies and our friends in India to try and put pressure from within, because pressure from within is equally important as pressure from without. So I think in the long term, we do need that international pressure, but also I agree with the last speaker that we absolutely need somebody to mediate. Bringing India and Pakistan to the table is difficult enough, but Pakistan has been showing willing, and in fact, if you actually look at how democracy and the rule of law is working, Pakistan has actually come on in leaps and bounds over the last 10 years, whereas India has gone backwards. And I think 10 years ago, you would have said it's going to be difficult to bring them around the table because of issues within Pakistan. But now it's issues within India, which is entirely the blockage on coming to a conclusion. So we have to use all of our everything we've got to try and bring them together to press India. I don't really have much hope that the United Nations is going to be able to deliver on the 1947 resolutions, because basically the United Nations, for one point, has no sort of force of power. It only has forces of persuasion. And secondly, it has largely been captured. There's an awful lot of countries now that simply vote the way China tells them to vote. We have, particularly the Human Rights Council in the United Nations, has been taken over by the worst human rights abusers. We find that the worst human rights abusers have all managed to get themselves elected to the Human Rights Committee, so the Human Rights Council. So I'm not very hopeful about from the United Nations perspective in the short term. Although Mr. Guterres, I think, is a good man and has the right has the right inclinations. But we actually have to be also to be consistent. What we're seeing from Russia in Ukraine, we can't say countries that are not supporting Ukraine against Russia. That does beg the question, because basically we have a power in Europe that invading another power is doing exactly the sort of thing. The Russians are moving millions of people into the territory they've grabbed from Ukraine. So it would very, very much help if some countries were more outspoken in terms of, particularly in the Indian subcontinent where this is going on, about the egregious war that Russia is prosecuting on Ukraine, because it's very much the same sort of thing that's going on with India in Kashmir, in that they're trying to change the population so that they can then maybe run a plebiscite affected by their population changes and get the result they want. Now, this is something that is totally against international law and against human rights. So we need to work together, but we need to be consistent. If we're not consistent, it weakens our message. So I think that's the message I'm going to leave you with. I think the geopolitics is really important, but I think that I'm not pessimistic that over the next 10 years, I think we will get some sort of resolution to this problem. I think it has to involve Pakistan and India getting around a table and coming to some mutually agreeable position, but it also needs the consent of the Kashmiri people. And so it is tripartite in that respect, but it is in terms of the geopolitics of this, it is an international issue that we internationally need to solve. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Mr. Benny, for your time and for your enlightening views. Now, I would like to invite our third speaker of the day, Dr. Mubin Shah. Dr. Mubin Shah hails from Indian-occupied Jammu and Kashmir and is a direct victim of India's unilateral measures on August 5. He is the former president of the Jammu Kashmir Chamber of Commerce and also the president of Kashmir Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Dr. Shah, please sensitize our audience regarding the ordeal of ordinary Kashmiris in Indian-occupied Jammu and Kashmir. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you very much, Maria, and thank you for His Excellency, the Ambassador, for inviting me for this important webinar. And I have been given a subject of economic implications of Indian illegal measures in Indian-occupied Kashmir. The point as well as I would like to slightly before that tell Mr. Phil that everything that India has done, 1947, has affected the economy of Kashmir. And it is not only by the present illegal changes they have done, but it has been happening right from 1947. It has now become more blatant, and it has become, and our economy has been affected right from 1947. Now, how does occupier control the economy? I have sort of analyzed it, and in my own way as a businessman also. First is the control of land and occupation. Second is one of our most important resource, that is water, hydroeconomics and conflict. Third is our economic losses which have happened. And the fourth is the control over financial institutions. These are the four main things on which I would like to speak. Because of paucity of time, I may not, I have made actually a detailed paper on this, which I could share. So number one is the control of land occupation. A lot of people in the world do not know that India has made a model of occupation. The model of occupation has been basically, they have an army of, with some figures of 700,000 or almost 1 million to 1 million armed forces in Kashmir. And what they have done? They have done that they presently are occupying illegally. Leave aside the legal transfer of land which has been given by the government of J&K to the army. Illegally, as per their own chief minister in 2015 to 2018, Mehbooba Mufti, she told in the Legislative Assembly that 4.3 lakh canals, that is 53,750 acres, have been occupied by the army illegally. The army has illegally occupied diverse topographies, including forests, hills, glaciers, stream beds, paddy fields, and peripheries. So this is one aspect. And because of that, there has been an emergence of a new form of multilateral and humanitarian occupation that reinforces the institutionalized vehemence against occupied people. So the point is, and besides this, one of our very important organizations, the JKCCS, who's unfortunately, Mr. Khurram Parvez is under arrest for the last 1.5 years. He documented all this, that this is not limited to only land only, but also includes 1,856 buildings, including 1,526 private buildings, cinemas, industrial units, and hotels. And the irony is that most of these owners have been given very nominal rents. In a report, why this has happened in all this time, and there have been forcible land acquisition for projects, including highways. You see, the Indian authorities have fooled the all the international people that have further documented by acquiring land through agencies such as National Highway Authority of India, Indian Railways, and others in the name of improved connectivity and development. In a report by Auckland Institute Research Team in USA, in context of the scrapping of Article 370, the researchers called the investments could be a Trojan horse for forcing the demographic composition of Kashmir, and adds that this move resembles to that of the illegal Israeli settlement in Palestine's West Bank. Unfortunately, for us, India has taken the model of Israel in occupying our place, and slowly, they are taking all our economic places. And you will be surprised. A lot of the people here will be surprised to know that in Kashmir, almost every village, not in the city because that will be visible. It is more true in far-flung villages that every entrance and exit points are having army camps. And in some cases, there are even drop gates. Now, so you can understand that once, these type of lands are occupied, what will happen to our economy? What are the losses to our economy? I will give you a very simple case of a property which is within the Srinagar city. We call as Totu grounds. It was given long time back in 1950s by the state government to the army for its camp. And then subsequently, the state government gave them in replacement land somewhere away from the city. And the army did not even give up that land. They took both the lands. And that is how the illegal occupation of our land is happening all the time. And we in the chamber, we used to, sort of fight these cases. And that is why people like me were, targeted by the Indian army and Indian forces. Now, the second very important thing is the hydroeconomics and conflict. You see, there is an Indus Water Treaty between India and Pakistan, while as the waters within the Indian Punjab were given to India, while as the waters which were flowing through Kashmir, J&K were given to Pakistan. So for that, there's a different issue about it. But the problem is in this the power stations which were built on the run of the river, because that is the only power projects which can be set up in Kashmir. They had a model, they had in the state apparatus through one of their biggest companies called the National Hydro Power Corporation, NHPC. Now this NHPC, first of all, it owes 20,000 crores, about 2.5 billion to the J&K state for using their water as a repair for the power generated from their resource, number one. And this company has a present base of $97 billion with a yearly income of $710 million. 1/3 of its generating capacity is in Kashmir and has rightly got the name of East India Company. Kashmir Chamber, which I was head from 2006 and 2000, had been fighting regarding return of these assets, which they built without or with agreement of limited time. They have taken it for perpetuity as such. Although the government of India created some commissions, they recommended return of the project, they never gave that back. While our industry in Kashmir is reeling under power cuts, they are, by occupying our most important resource earning and becoming big corporations with profits. Besides, we are incurring losses, which is further depriving us economically. This is the second part. Now, third is the economic losses. Now, the world knows that during COVID, that what are the losses to the businesses which happened all over the world because of closure of businesses and everything. And they were, let us say, different places at 1 year, for 6 months, or whatever it is. We have had from 1990 a closure of 3,600 days. That is about 10 years. Complete closure. Why? Because they have not settled our Kashmir issue as per the aspirations of the Kashmiri people. I, being president of the chamber, or subsequent presidents, and every president up till now have been demanding that the people of Kashmir should get the necessary compensation, or the question is the settlement of Kashmir should happen as far, because we are deprived economically of because of these closures, constant closures, because of non-settlement of Kashmir. Now, The Kashmir Chamber of Commerce in December 2021, they have calculated that the loss has been for 2 years from 2019, 50,000 crores. That is $5.5 billion. And if this is calculated for 2 years. And if you now calculate it for the 10 years I am talking about, which has been started from 1990, it amounts to $27.5 billion. Now, what is the consequences of all this? The consequences of all this is also another important aspect, which is now having bearing because of the change in the laws, is that who invested in this, for example, who invested in industries, particularly from 1990, became sick, and they have become bankrupt away, and they are fighting with the government of India to give them relief or something like that. Why? Because the problem is not theirs. The problem is because of the non-settlement of Kashmir. But now what has added to the problem is this thing, that these assets of these local businessmen previously could not have been taken by corporates from outside Kashmir or any businessman from India. Now, because of change of law, they can take these assets at throwaway prices. Result will be that all our economic spaces will be also covered by them. This is very important to understand by everybody who is talking about Kashmir, that this is what is, besides I will talk about how many people they have killed and all, that is a very important thing, but this is the system by which and motivate and the model they have created. And I recall, and this is also a model which they have fine-tuned with other parts of India previously. Because if you see the history of India, there have been from 1947 a lot of problems between Muslims and Hindus. And I have an experience that in 1993, I went to see a brass manufacturer in Moradabad, which is the brass usually is made by Muslim artisans, but the traders are Hindus. What happened? You see, the traders there told me that we cannot progress because after every 5 years, if we go up, we are finished by this communal right and we have to start from zero again. And the result is those spaces were taken over by the Indian Hindus. And the result is they are still living in those as an artisan. This is going to happen now in Kashmir also, the same thing. Now, another aspect is this thing. Now, in Kashmir, we have a lot of tourist places, like famous places like Gulmarg, Pahalgam and all. There are leased lands on which local people have created assets all these years. There was a scheme of the government that this could be, bought over by these local people. They did not. They used because as you know, in countries like India, the courts are an extension of the executive. And they, threw that out of the law, out of court, although the government had essentially, the state government. Now, the thing is this thing, that what has happened is that they are refusing to extend those leases. And they are going to auction. Okay, no problem. If there's auction, they will get a better price. But with the new changes, the auction will be attended by outsiders. By the action of a 35A, these auctions will be taken over as these assets, prime assets, wherever they are on leased land of the government, they will be taken over by the corporates and businessmen from outside Kashmir, which was not the case before August 5, 2019. Unfortunately, and also the latest law of land use where agricultural land can be used for non-agricultural use, thereby making a way for land to be taken over by corporates from India. And already, unfortunately, our Waqf properties, which was, having a very big asset base. Previously by Mufti Said, it was taken over by the government. And now we realize at that time, they were giving an impression that, there is corruption there and all, but now people in Kashmir realize that it was basically an idea of disempowering.
Dr. Sir, please take into consideration the paucity of time.
Yes, I will finish this basically with another point is the control of our financial institutions. We have a bank called the JK Bank, and it was fully owned by the state government. But now, by the previous J&K governors, SP Malik, it has been turned to a public sector bank. which results in that the bank instead has all the control from the government of India. So all these ways, the whole economy is being controlled. Now the land is also being controlled economy. So, but at the same time, besides, because of this Kashmir non-refusal of Kashmir right to serve, data is there from 1990 that more than 100,000 people have been killed, 150,000 civilians arrested, 8,500 custodial killings, 12,000 disappearances, and 110,000 structures destroyed, 11,170 rape cases, and 7,000 people with pellet injuries, out of which 700 are completely almost blind. So all these things are important to disseminate information to people who only know that, okay, it is human right. This whole thing is very important to understand, and then so that our people who are fighting for Kashmir outside Kashmir and Pakistan and India know these details, and they disseminate this information to the general public. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Saab. Indeed, a very sad state of affairs in Indian-occupied Jammu and Kashmir. Ladies and gentlemen, women have been a particular target of the Indian occupation regime in the occupied Jammu and Kashmir. Our next speaker is a leading female human rights activist, Shaista Sakri, who had to migrate to Pakistan during early 90s as a result of Indian regime's suppressive measures. So Shaista is going to tell us about the ordeal of Kashmiri women. Thank you, Shaista. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and thank you, His Excellency, Mr. Ambassador. Thank you to the embassy, and special thanks to Maria Atik for organizing this webinar on Kashmir. It's always very difficult whenever I'm asked to speak about Kashmir, and Maria has specifically asked to stick to time. So just in 5 or 7 minutes, it's like touching the tip of the iceberg. I can only highlight what women of Kashmir they have gone through in all these years. So where to start? If I start before what happened before 5th of August 2019, we remember Kunan Poshpura. We remember what happened with Asya and Nilofer. We know what happened to Asifa Bano. We know hundreds and thousands of half widows. We know hundreds and thousands of rape cases, as Mubin Saab was mentioning. We know there are so many cases where the Kashmiri women have been directly impacted by this occupation. And this occupation has not just directly impacted their lives, indirectly. We can see Parveena Ahinga, her son was taken away and is still disappeared. And she's, every month she sits in the Srinagar Park and waits for her son. We have seen so many Kashmiri women who after even 20-25 years of their sons being disappeared, they are still waiting for their children, even after 20 to 25 years. Where to start? If we start from what happened before 5th August 2019 or after what's happening now, there's not much difference. But the thing is, now India is publicly and is saying the things which were hidden before, as we have seen and heard what the BJP leader said in public event, that they will, now is the time Indian people can marry white-skinned Kashmiri women freely, and they have the freedom to marry them. And if you remember 2019, there was a report that how to marry Kashmiri woman was the leading search on Google by Indian community of Indian masses. So this is how they objectify the women of Kashmir. We have seen through media that they just portray Kashmiri women wearing farran or wearing the tilla or wearing the beautiful jewelry. But if you see what actually Kashmiri woman goes through from day-to-day life, only if we see even a child as young as a young child, a female young child as young as Hiba, 18 months old, she was pelleted while she was in the lap of her own mother. If we just remember Insha Mushtaq, she was 12 years old and she was sitting inside her own house and she was pelleted while just peeping outside the window of her house and just to see what's going outside. And she was pelleted in both her eyes, and she is blind now for rest of her life. We remember what we have seen, so many names, so many Kashmiri women who come forward or who are staying back at the home. They all are sufferers, they all are the victims. But we have to remember, when we talk about Kashmiri women being the victim, we have to remember them as the fighters, as the resilient fighters as well. They are fighting this occupation, be it in the form of Parveena Ahengar, who is looking for her son, or be it in the form of Asya Indrabi, who is representing the whole nation and is in Tihar jail right now. If we see, be it the mother of Maqbul Butt, who was given 3 sons, or be it the mother of any common Kashmiri who is ready to sacrifice his own life or life of his son or daughter, whatever, they are fighting, they are showing the courage, they are showing the resilience in every form and in way. Because we have seen, and there are so many reports where it is shown that this occupation has impacted Kashmiri women, not just physically, not just mentally, not just psychologically. Now even the reproductive, they are impacted reproductively as well. Kashmiri women, who used to be like the symbol of beauty in Indian media or Bollywood, are now, we can see them, how they are suffering in day-to-day life of theirs. If we just remember that it is even the mothers of sons who are in the jail right now. These are the mothers who have to go through the trial of Indian biased judiciary as well to seek justice for their sons. Just after revocation of Article 370, 15,000 or more than 15,000 children were taken away from Kashmir and to different jails of India. And then these families, and especially those mothers, had to go to India to look for their children, and they never knew where their children were. So this conflict that has impacted the women of Kashmir in every way, in every form. And we have to see that, as I mentioned, Asya Indrabi, there are many families like Asya Indrabi. There are like many families and mothers like Asya Indrabi, whose children's dream is just to sit as a family together to have a dinner. I know this family, family of Asya Indrabi, and her son Ahmed. The only dream of his is to see his parents together and to have a simple lunch together under one roof, which we all take for granted. In this pandemic of Corona, we saw how this curfew, or how this, we were in a lavish kind of a curfew here in London, but that reminded people of what a curfew can do in occupation, what a curfew can do to the health of a woman. We now talk about a lot about mental health issues in Western society now, but we have to see what this conflict has an impact on the women of Kashmir mentally, physically, and psychologically as well. And these are all the factors we have to put in our into mind, as well as we have to let people of the world know that even after going through this conflict, the women of Kashmir, they have spoken now. They have come out on the roads as well. They have shown their political will as well. Be the protest of Kashmir, in the Kashmir, they come out on the roads, be it in the form of holding pen in one hand and having a stone in another. Kashmiri women have shown that they can come out, they can write, they can read, they can speak, they can shout, and they can scream as well whenever it comes to the against the occupation of India. We have seen the pictures of Kashmiri girls holding volleyball in one hand and a stone in another, and showing the occupation, showing to the world that we, if given the opportunities, we like to hold volleyball in hand, but this is the occupation of India that is forcing us to have the stone. we have seen the pictures of Kashmiri women holding the pen, holding the bags on their, holding the backpacks, but protesting against the occupation. They are telling to this world that we have a lot of capabilities, a lot of, we can, if given the opportunities, we can show to this world what we can do, but this occupation is not letting us. But saying all that, despite all the occupation, we need to recognize the resilience of Kashmiri women. We need to salute the resilience of Kashmiri women, that despite all the factors, despite all the factors that India is using rape as a weapon of war in Kashmir, a Kashmiri woman stood up alongside their menfolk, and they are be it in the political scenario, be it the journalistic point of view, whatever way, Kashmiri women stood up against this occupation and is still standing tall in front of this Indian occupation. And they are looking towards you, Mr. Ambassador. They are looking towards us in the diaspora to raise their voice. I won't call them voiceless, as Arundhati Roy correctly said, that they are not voiceless people. They are screaming, but they are not heard, and they are not selectively heard. So they are speaking, and we need to amplify their voices. And it is your job, Mr. Ambassador, our job, and as a diaspora, our responsibility to speak up for the people of Kashmir, and especially for the women of Kashmir. And I thank you all. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you so much, Shasta, for your views. Ladies and gentlemen, our next speaker of the day is Mr. Altaf Hussain Wani. Mr. Wani also migrated to Pakistan during 90s and is also a witness of India's oppressive measures in occupied Kashmir. Since then, he has been peacefully campaigning for the Kashmiris' right of self-determination. I will now invite Mr. Altaf Hussain Wani, the president of Kashmir Institute of International Relations, to enlighten our audiences regarding the demographic re-engineering undertaken by the Indian occupation regime in Kashmir. Mr. Wani, the floor is yours now.
Thank you, Maria. Thank you, Embassy of Belgium, especially Ambassador, for inviting me to this panel of learned speakers. A lot has been said about the current scenario in occupied Jammu and Kashmir, as I have been asked to deal with the political engineering of demographic change in occupied Kashmir. As we all know, the demographic engineering in occupied Kashmir existed even before the Article 370 or 35A was revoked through different means. India tried to do it. But after revoking the Article 370 and 35A by the BJP regime, they have fastened the process in changing the demography in occupied Kashmir. Lots of laws have been passed, and we all know that after the revocation, the state was dismembered into 2 union territories, and thereby taking away all the autonomy, whatever this state of Indian occupied Kashmir had. And at least 800 new or amended laws have been now enacted in occupied Kashmir to fasten this process of demographic engineering in Indian occupied Kashmir. And with this, the first one was, of course, the change in the domicile laws, through which we all know how this process has been made easy for the Indians to secure the domiciles of Indian occupied Kashmir, to enable them to purchase land and to seek jobs in Indian occupied Kashmir. And along with that, the New Delhi also, then as Dr. Mubin Shah was telling us about the economic loss in Kashmir while he dealt with, the army has already a huge land occupied in Kashmir. Now the government of India has also given the army the authority to occupy any land, to declare it strategic, and then build the cantonments on that. And for that, they need not to have any NOC from any of the local authorities in the territory. So this is another way of bringing in the demographic change. All the natural resources, previously it was only the locals who were able to deal with them, but now the government of India has given the authority to the non-Kashmiris to do it, so they can do the mining, they can do all these things in Kashmir, and thereby can come in and settle in Kashmir. These are, and also to rewrite the history of Kashmir. Now, we have seen the government of India, the measures they have taken through the new education policy in Kashmir. The Urdu which was the official language in Kashmir, that has been taken over by the Hindi and now Devangari and others. And so they are trying to rewrite the history of Kashmir so that Kashmiris would not know about their past history, the glorious history of Kashmir, and the resistance which Kashmiris have been putting against the occupation for last so many decades. Along with that, in order to fasten the demographic engineering in Kashmir, the government of India also, on one hand, did propose and in the organization order that all those Pandits who had left the Kashmir will be relocated to Kashmir and will be proper security and all that. But all those Kashmiris who have migrated to Pakistan and Azad Kashmir during the last four forced migrations, they are not entitled to return. Their right to return has been denied by the government of India. This is another way of bringing those changes on the ground. And I may also talk about that all the landmarks of the Muslims and Kashmiri, they are being erased. Now they are being renamed against the fanatic Hindus, like Sardar Patel, Sham Pardhan Mukherjee and others. And there is zero space has been left for any dissent for APAC and other pro-freedom parties in Kashmir. But on the other hand, the government of India is creating new and some parties like Tamil leadership they are creating in Kashmir in order to pursue the people to take part in political activities who can be the stewards in or collaborate with them what they have done after revoking the Article 370 and 35 in occupied Kashmir. All the top posts of the civil servants in Kashmir, they are now, the Muslims have been removed almost from all the top positions, and now we have all the non-locals, we have the Indians who are holding all these top positions in Kashmir. So the last but not the least, which there's change which they have done in order to force the demography in Kashmir. On one hand, the killings which are taking place in day in and day out in Kashmir, Dr. Mubin Shah dealt with that. Shahista Safi also had a light on that. But on the other hand, what the government of India is planning, or which they are doing to, is that the delimitation which they have done of the assembly constituencies in Indian occupied Kashmir, that clearly states that they are trying to have the number of Hindus more in the assembly than Muslims in order to force to have an Hindu chief minister in Kashmir and to replace the agenda of Hindutva in Kashmir through these means. And when we go to the delimitations, we have seen that Kashmir, the Kashmir Valley, which is a dominant Muslim area, which has no seat for any scheduled tribe or scheduled caste. Now 3 seats have been reserved for that, and with that, the Peshawar, which was a Muslim majority area, but it had 2 seats, but now it has 3, and 2 have been carved out of the Hindu majority area. Likewise, in other places in Indian occupied Kashmir, they have done the same thing. In order to increase the numbers of the Hindus in the assembly, they have given Kashmir just 1 seat extra, and while as the Jammu is having the 7 more seats in the assembly constituency. This is a type of engineering which they have been doing along with those land reforms and other acts by which they are trying to make Kashmiris landless, they are trying to make Kashmiris jobless, and they are trying to make Kashmiris homeless in their own homeland, taking all their resources and all that. These are some of the measures which government of India has taken, and recently we have seen 2 of the conclaves which were held, one in Srinagar and one in Jammu, where the whole of Kashmir land was put before the people as it is real estate for the Indian businessmen, Indian big companies. So they will come and occupy the land, and that will also be an element in forcing the demographic change in Indian occupied Kashmir. These are some of the measures which government of India has taken, but we have seen the people of Kashmir are putting their resistance. But in order to force this, the first step which government of India took, it was to debase and discredit the Kashmiri leadership. First of all the Kashmiri leadership were taken into custody. They were taken to the different Indian jails. Then they were framed under the UAPA. The sedition charges were leveled against them, and a malicious campaign was run against all the political leaders in Kashmir. And then they enforced their agenda in Kashmir one by one, and they are on it till date. But we have seen, unfortunately, the reports, although we have seen lots of reports, lots of communications by the special rapporteurs of the Human Rights Office of the Human Rights Commission to the Government of India to this regard, but unfortunately, Government of India is so arrogant that they are not taking cognizance of any of these communications, but they are on their path to change the demography of the Indian occupied Kashmir by using all the methods available to them. Thank you, Maria, for having me on this.
Thank you, Mr. Vani, for your remarks and your views. Ladies and gentlemen, our next speaker of the day is the voice of the diaspora from Brussels, Mr. Ali Raza Syed, President of the Kashmir Council EU. I would request you to please share your views and thoughts regarding today's subject. However, I would like to once again request the speakers to please take into consideration the paucity of time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maria, and thank you, His Excellency, the Ambassador, and the Embassy of Pakistan to give me the opportunity to say some words. I will not go into details because Shaista has already explained about the women, how they are suffering. Dr. Mobeen Saab has told about the economy, and Iltaf Wani Saab has shed the light on whole issue. But I just want to remind that the Kashmiris, they are for last 70 years, they are struggling for their rights, and we need the consistent struggle. And that is that matters a lot, because in Western world, in European Union, or in free world, I think we have to knock the doors regularly, and it will affect. If it's not affecting now, but I am sure that it will affect, and we have to reach the people of free world also, that they should know, and they should put pressure on the representative of their communities, and they should be given all the facts and figures. And what the Kashmir Council EU is trying here is to provide the information, provide the facts and figure about the Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir. And we are getting a lot of support, and I hope that it will help, that the day will come that the international community will be involved in that international dispute between India and Pakistan. It is not a border dispute. It is a matter of 20 million human beings. They are suffering for the last 70 years. And we have to resolve this issue by negotiation. But we have to involve the Kashmiri people as well, because the history shows that Tashkent Agreement, and then the Shimla Agreement, Lahore Agreement, and all the agreements, they failed. And we are still fighting for our rights. I think there is two things were missing. One, international community was not involved. It was bilateral agreements, and the Kashmiris were not involved. So for the matter of fact, if we want to have the peace in that region, in South Asia, we have to have the Kashmiris on the table also, and international players should be supported, and they should be involved in these negotiations. As the United Nations resolution, it is not the internal matter of India. It is an international dispute. It is the matter of 20 million people, human beings. And what the Indian occupation forces are doing, they are violating the international law. If you can see the 2018 and 2019 reports, these reports by the Human Rights Council, it shows that what Kashmiris were saying, what Pakistan was saying for last 70 years, it is endorsed by the international community. European Parliament's resolution of 2008 endorsed the idea or the what the Kashmiris are saying about the mass graves. Shaista has talked about Insha Mushtaq. Insha Mushtaq case was presented to the European Parliament also in 2019. So we have to take the cases, and we have to, with the consistency, we have to knock the doors of the power corridors, and the voice of the people of Jammu and Kashmir should be conveyed, their message should be conveyed to the international community. And I am sure that international community one day will act. For the present, unfortunately, the global situation is changing. The alliances are changing. And the Western world before that was coronavirus, and now it's the Ukraine war. But Ukraine war is also give us an opportunity to remind the people, the free world, that if a powerful attacks a weak and he commits crimes there, it's the same happened in Jammu and Kashmir. India is trying to commit crimes there for last 70 years, and especially from 1990, they have committed crimes against the humanity. There is not a single criminal is convicted by the Indian courts, and that's what we are asking, that all those criminals who committed crimes against the civilian, who forcefully disappeared the people there, they should be brought to justice. And I hope that the case will be brought to the International Criminal Court or International Court of Justice one day, and the Indian authorities, and especially the criminals who are involved in the crimes against humanity and crimes against the civilians, they will be paying the price for that. So we have to continue our struggle, and that's the way we have to convey the message of our oppressed people to the free world, that this cannot continue. India and Pakistan, both, they are nuclear powers, and God forbid, the one day if there is any any incident, it will affect whole world. So to avoid that, international community should come forward and play their role. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ali Raza Sayyed. So our last speaker of the day is Muzammil Ayub Thakur, who is president of the World Kashmir Freedom Movement. Muzammil migrated from Indian-occupied Kashmir when he was 3 years old, and the current occupation regime is trying to falsely implicate him under their draconian laws. But that has not been able to deter his resolve to fight for the cause of his people and his motherland. Muzammil, the floor is yours now.
Thank you very much to the organizers, particularly Mr. Ambassador and Maria, who have worked tirelessly, not just for this program, but I know personally how many efforts they have made generally in regards to Kashmir. You see, I'll try to be as concise as I can, given the amount of time available. I know that I'm the last speaker, so I don't want to drag this on unnecessarily, but for someone like me from Indian-occupied Kashmir, this isn't, events like this and webinars like this, it isn't just symbolic of Pakistan and its people's commitment towards Kashmir, but it's a necessity. to remind the world of its continued indifference to the oppressed and its complicity in India's never-ending violations by maintaining criminal silence and thus contributing to the annihilation of a nation. Whatever has happened in Kashmir is not ancient history. It's all happened in our lifetimes, as Shaista has mentioned, and even as Altaf Saab is talking about the realities post-2019. And this continues to happen right now, and it will continue to happen in the future, and it will get worse. But what's worse than that is that no one in Kashmir has known anything less than what we're seeing right now: the occupation, subjugation, oppression, hundreds of thousands dead, destruction of property and businesses in the billions, as Mubin Saab said, tens of thousands raped, innumerable enforced disappearances, thousands of mass and unmarked graves, human shields, torture camps, bullets, pellets, orphans, widows, half-widows, cyber cells, media blackouts, illegal draconian laws, false flag operations, war crimes, crimes against humanity, ethnic cleansing, genocide, demographic change, settler colonialism, fake and staged encounters. And that's just the tip of the iceberg of the list. Instead of going into the details and examples, today I want to talk about the role of diaspora, which I've been given, by exploring the root issues and potential strategies. Because whilst it's necessary to show solidarity with Kashmir, as you know, it's not only just a necessity, it's what we've been, our entire framework has been built on. We need to investigate the who, the what, the how, and the why. But more than that, it's about countering the propaganda and doing it strategically so that any attempt by India to negate would go unnoticed or even backfire, as we've seen with the farmers' protests and the commentary by international figures. Now, although Modi, the BJP and the RSS personify fascism, India has not become fascist. They always had this vision of Akhand Bharat, a neo-colonialist, imperial, expansionist, radical right-wing nation. And this isn't me, an oppressed Kashmiri, saying this. India's own media has extensively written about mass radicalization that India doesn't even acknowledge. Case in point would be Asifa, as Shaista mentioned, who was kidnapped, raped, gang raped in 2018 by 8 Hindu extremists and then killed. Mass protests followed, demanding the release of the criminals, who eventually were granted bail, probably for the same excuse as murdering Afzal Guru, to satisfy India's collective conscience, which indicates what India's collective conscience stinks of. Another paper reported by that Mary Lawler, she was a UN Special Rapporteur on Human Rights Defenders, stated that India's human rights situation is very serious. These are her words, not mine. This is the same country that awarded medals to those who used Kashmiris as human shields and staged 2 fake encounters in Pulwama and Srinagar just last year, alleged that they were terrorists, only to be proven as lies pretty quickly. The same country who refused to give the bodies for burial after they killed them in staged encounters, a right that is respected even in war, but not for Kashmiris. Now, one would ask, where is the judiciary in all of this? If you take a cursory glance on the internet, there's evidence that the Indian judiciary has finally been given the freedom to be used as a tool to impose, institutionalize, and legalize the BJP's reign of terror, Hindutva terror. And to clean up their image abroad, they spend $40,000 a month to hire one of the biggest lobby firms to mobilize public opinion in their favor. The question that needs to be asked is, what does India need a PR firm for? Is it because of the disinformation they disseminate as reported by EU disinfo labs? Or for the rampant denial of every civil liberty imaginable? Or for the enforcing the longest communications lockdown and blackout in history? Or for rewriting their own history, their own laws, their own constitution? Or one of a million other reasons? One of the ways India has made headway is by creating and sponsoring institutions, particularly academic and non-governmental, in crucial capitals around the world, notably in the UK, the US, Belgium, and Switzerland, to demonize Pakistan and in turn Kashmiris. Their tactics are apparent and proven in the EU Disinfo Labs report, so it doesn't require much imagination to conceptualize a counter strategy. But we should ultimately be in a position where India is forced to rethink their schemes because of our efforts. One of those efforts should be to preempt Indian propaganda by continuous analysis, regular publishing, and accessing spaces that they have occupied. India's recent projects has been to heavily invest in puppet Kashmiris and install them in critical power corridors to amplify the Indian narrative. Even some, for example, Yana Mir Chanda, who goes now by the name Yana Mir, are masquerading as Muslim Kashmiris when they are absolutely not and completely far from it. They have found that indigenous voices travel further and resonate harder in power corridors, proven by indigenous Rohingya and Palestinians and North Koreans that defected, as we've seen over the last years. Or even creative campaigns like Kony 2012, if anybody is familiar with that, which became viral, forcing the war criminal to go underground since then. If India have adapted to modern warfare, we need to get ahead of the curve. Start using lawfare and apply game theory. We know we're in the right. We have the law on our side. The UN resolutions and the Geneva Conventions to refer back to, international conventions to utilize. All we require now is to take a proactive stance and force India into a reactive position, make mistakes, retreat, and submit. And there's evidence of India being forced into unwanted positions. We've seen the implosion within India, especially after CAA, NRC, and the Farmers' Bill controversy. The same people who were banging the drums of war against the people of Kashmir are now facing the merchants of death themselves. And now we see the farmers' protests and the consequences people have faced for reporting, tweeting, or posting on Facebook. The irony is when it happened to Kashmiris, nobody stood with us. And for that, they are reaping what they sowed and suffering the same fate they allowed on the people of Kashmir and even encouraged. India has become polarized with every decision their government has made and exposed the Indian population's hypocrisy towards Kashmir and their selective solidarity regarding rights, brutality, occupation, and oppression. But it can be capitalized upon if we act swiftly, efficiently, and effectively. The phrase, necessity is the mother of invention, comes to mind, and right now it rings true. But so does the phrase, urgency is of the essence. There's so much more to be said beyond solidarity and more on the mechanisms that exist that can be used to amplify the Kashmir cause and disrupt India's insidious plans against Pakistan. Exposing and countering is one stage, one angle among many. In parallel, their influence needs to be diluted and a targeted campaign launched to criminalize those who contribute and contributed to the occupation, subjugation, and oppression of Kashmir and the sponsored terrorism inside Pakistan. But it must be said, the diaspora faces consequences. Ask Mubin Shahsab, ask me, how our families are harassed, tortured, and even murdered. I've had a sustained smear campaign launched against me for nearly 2 years, which directly affects my family in London and in occupied Kashmir. These are hard realities. But we knowingly immersed ourselves in this movement, knowing full well how the Indian state will respond. There is no turning back, bowing, or breaking. We have the skills, Mr. Ambassador, the abilities, the focus, the drive, the intellect, and the determination to succeed. Utilizing ideas, strategies, resources, and manpower, the liberation of terror-ridden Kashmir from the shackles of Indian tyranny and cementing Pakistan's role as a global leader is closer than we think. Mr. Ambassador, they look towards Pakistan, they look towards you, they look towards us, all, collectively. Because we live in privilege, we have the freedoms to do what we can. I thank you and I close. Thank you so much. Maria, you're muted.
Thank you so much, Muzammil, for your very thoughtful views and opinions. Muzammil was our last speaker of the day. I would like to thank all our distinguished speakers for taking time out and enlightening us regarding the current state of affairs in the Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir and the oppressive measures of the occupation regime. In the end, we would like to conclude the seminar, and I would request Mr. Ambassador, Dr. Asad Majid, to give his concluding remarks. Mr. Ambassador, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Maria. And I'd like to thank all our speakers today for their, I must say, very useful, focused, and informative presentations. And I think listening to, and I also stand educated in many ways in terms of the various aspects highlighted by our speakers. And that really was the purpose and objective of this seminar, to essentially sensitize and inform people of what is going on, and in the process give a voice, or at least as I think Shaista rightly pointed out, that the Kashmiris are not voiceless, but the international community and the world must hear them. And I think we've heard some very, very useful and important presentations. This was live streamed on the Facebook. We are going to upload this on the YouTube, our embassy's YouTube channel, and we will share the contents of this with the media also. But recapping the conversation today very briefly, because I know we have already overshot time, but I think it's important because Lord Wajid mentioned about this being about time that we all start looking at solutions. And for that, to create an environment where we can find solutions, I think it's really important for the international community to inject some sanity and some reasonableness in the present Indian government. I think MEP Bannon spoke about India actually violating its own laws through those unilateral measures that it took on August 5, 2019, and also highlighted the importance of all of us actually working together, and the need for someone powerful, someone influential, someone with enough clout to basically mediate. And I was frankly glad to see and hear that he was optimistic about the parties being able to find a solution. And I think Dr. Mubin Shah's presentation was really because the economic aspect of this crisis is not really as much highlighted, and the resulting economic repression, because I think that is what hurts the people of Kashmir more than anything else, because it really takes away their bread and butter. And the way he actually staggered and broke up his presentation, frankly, I found that to be very, very useful, because frankly, you know, one of the justifications given by the Indian government in basically promulgating those measures on August 5 was to improve the economic lot of Kashmiris. And for Dr. Shah to point out that, you know, Indian actions have actually impacted every aspect of Kashmiri economy, and the manner in which the Indian occupation forces have basically taken those unilateral measures, and Mr. Ali Raza also alluded to those. It's something that was very useful. And I must say that Shaista's presentation was very, very powerful. It almost brought me to tears, because, and I think that's the central message, that the Kashmiri women have actually faced the brunt of the Indian occupation. And we salute and we join you all in saluting the resilience of Kashmiri women. And I think it's absolutely important and critical for all of us to come together in amplifying the message, the voices that are coming out of Kashmir. Mr. Altaf Hussain Wani has highlighted how this demographic re-engineering is taking place, you know, how these measures have made it much easier for outsiders to obtain domiciles, buy property, and then to replace the indigenous population, and basically also their efforts and attempts to get a Hindu chief minister eventually to advance their agenda and to make Kashmiris homeless in their own land. And I think that was also useful. I agree with Ali Raza. I think consistency matters. It is also important that you know, we need to come together. We need to coordinate, and we need to knock every door, because this message needs to go out and should be heard by as many as we can reach out to. And Kashmiris being involved is also, of course, absolutely critical. And this is something that Muzammil, thank you very much for your very, I must say, short, crisp, but very focused presentation. And having been Pakistan's ambassador in Washington before coming here in Brussels, and having interacted with you from Washington also, I can tell you that really, I think the role of Kashmiri diaspora and the role of Pakistani diaspora and the role of the two coming together to basically, you know, counter this hideous well-organized, well-executed, well-planned campaign to demonize Pakistan, and together with that, basically to demonize Kashmiri resistance and their efforts to claim right of self-determination is something that we really think hard and look at ways. And here in Brussels, we have seen this Info Lab at work, and that operation, frankly, is still not over. And that's where the diaspora needs to come together, in terms of credible voices, who can, and the manner in which you will be heard, frankly, perhaps we will not be heard. And I am a strong believer in working together with our diaspora, and I assure you, I hear you, and I think that's a very important message. Let's use this opportunity today to renew our pledge to work together to continue to amplify the message on Kashmir. I thank you all once again for being with us and for making these very useful contributions. Thank you so much. So we can close. Thank you.